welcome to today's episode of Community Connections. I am your host, Anna Orr, and this is airing right here on OROMIA11. Today's guests are Dr. Reverend Timothy Jackson and Pastor Jessica Jackson, the two co-founders of Morning Glory Montessori. We are talking all things education, community, and faith. Please make sure that you tune into this episode. It's going to be a wonderful episode with some really good information about education and where our community is headed. This you won't want to miss. I'm so excited to have you both joining me here on this episode of Community Connections. Reverend Dr. Timothy Jackson and Pastor Jessica Jackson. You all are here and we are talking about your Montessori school, Morning Glory Montessori. Can you please introduce yourselves to viewers, please, and your roles at the school?
Well, I'm Reverend Jessica Jackson, known as Pastor Jess in the community, and I am the head of school and the founding lead guide for Morning Glory.
Wonderful.
My name is Reverend Dr. Timothy Jackson, and my role at the school will be Director of Faith Pedagogy.
And for those that are unfamiliar with that word, I am familiar, but can you please share what that is for people that may hear that and go, I need to write that down?
Yes. Pedagogy simply is defined as a way of practicing one's discipline in the context that I will be forming the faith context or the faith piece to the school. So it's these spiritual practices of way of being, and so that's kind of a 30,000 definition.
Mm-hmm. And Morning Glory Montessori will be opening this fall, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, can you share with us just a little bit about what a Montessori school is? I know that some have heard of private, some have heard of public, some may have even heard of parochial, but they may not understand what a Montessori school is and what that focus is separate from what they may have already encountered.
Yeah, so Montessori schools can come in all of those forms. So there are public Montessori schools, there are private Montessori schools. Some of it is age dependent of whether it would be public or private. But Morning Glory will be a private, faith-informed, Afrocentric Montessori school. So we focus our curriculum around what we call FAM, and it's an acronym that stands for Faith Afrocentric Montessori, and it's the first of its kind in the country to offer that kind of curriculum. Now let me just pull back on the M, because you asked about what makes Montessori different than traditional schools, and I would say a lot. There are three components to Montessori that make it high fidelity and authentic. The first is, of course, the child. And the child is at the center of everything. In a Montessori environment, we often speak in terms of following the child. And so in traditional educational systems, a lot of emphasis is kind of on the teacher and what the teacher puts in the child. I know these things and I'm going to share these things with you, right, and kind of open your brain and I put stuff in. Mm-hmm. And that's a very simplistic kind of way to think about it. But in the Montessori environment, it's really just the opposite. It's the child comes with so much, and our role, we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves guides, is to guide the child in drawing out. And I mean, when you go back to the original definition of what it means to educate, that's really in the Greek, in the Latin, I'm sorry, it means to draw out, literally. And so Montessori is aligned in that way where We create an environment. So the second component, the child is one. The second component is a prepared environment. And so a Montessori classroom looks very, very different than traditional educational environments. And ours is, we're starting with what's called the primary age, from 3 to 6, so preschool. So when you look at our classroom as compared to traditional preschool classrooms, it will look very different. Everything will be child-sized, and so that's maybe similar to a lot of preschool environments, but there's opportunities for the children. The materials are very different, scientifically designed by Dr. Montessori, categorized in 4 areas. So there's practical life, there's sensorial, so the child experiences the world through their senses, there's language, and then there's math. And so there are materials that correspond to each of those areas. The classroom is simple, it's beautiful, and it's orderly. So those are some of the components of the prepared environment. So it's the child, we follow the child. It's the environment that is prepared to draw out of the child, giving the child work to do that draws out of them. And then the third component is the prepared adult. And in the case of Montessori, the prepared adult really has to learn how to get out of the way and get over yourself. Don't be the one that kind of hinders the child from being independent, from growing in confidence, from growing in competence in their work in the classroom. And I'll just leave it here. The best Montessori classroom, which I think is very different than what you see in traditional classrooms, is one where the adults are almost invisible and the children are managing themselves. They are self-motivated. They are intrinsically engaged in learning because they're motivated by their interests. They're given really important things to do that have to do with life. You know, they're learning things that they can carry home in practical life and be a part of the family and a part of the community and contributing. And so it's just a very, very different experience. And the first time that I walked into a Montessori environment and saw it operating, I was healed as a parent, now as a grandmother, you know, of kind of what wasn't good in so many other traditional educational environments that I had experienced, both as a child myself and then as an adult caretaking for other children. So that's a little bit.
Okay. Now, Reverend Dr. Timothy, you were saying that you are going to be doing the faith-based programming. Can you talk to me about what that's like for such a young age group, imparting that type of information? Or
my primary responsibility is to work with the educators, the guides, and presenting to them what Howard Thurman talks about in his writings or in his philosophy and theological pedagogy, centering on 4 themes: God, self, nature, and community. And so the spiritual formation of the adult is very important. And my wife can speak to this regarding the spiritual preparation of the adult. That's part of the Montessori pedagogy. Well, what I'm doing, I'm building on that to make sure that the educators are centered and they're practicing the disciplines such as silence, meditation, prayer. And so this inwardness to the religious experience, or this opening where God can intimately interact with the individual, and the individual intimately interacts with the Creator. And then what does that look like in the children's house, in the Casa dei Bambini? How are we modeling love? How are we modeling patience? How are we modeling silence? How are we modeling grace and courtesy? And so our school will not be a traditional Christian school where we're, having Bible study and we're just kind of talking about Jesus. Our formation centers on this this way of being in community and our relationship with one another, our relationship with nature, and then how does our faith inform us in community? What does that look like in the learning environment? And then what does that look like when children go home and they're interacting with their siblings and their parents?
Okay.
Holistic, I think,
Okay.
is a way to think about it.
Yeah, sometimes, unfortunately, I can sound too academic.
Yeah, but it's what we're doing.
Right, right.
So,
and I think that's
yeah.
important for parents to
Yeah.
hear, but also for the community to hear, so that those that see this are able to support you all because they understand what's taking place and the value of that. Now, you said that, Pastor Jess, that this is going to be different than a traditional experience for kids. It's going to look different. Can you talk to me about class sizes? I know that a lot of students and parents have shared that it's very overwhelming for their kids to be in such large class sizes in the schools that they're in now, upwards of 20 to 30 kids in each class. And you wonder, how can the focus go to each student that they need with such large class sizes like that? What is the experience going to be like at Morning Glory Montessori?
Yeah, so you raised some really, really important issues. So we are starting with one classroom, as I said. It's for 3 to 6 years old children. And as my husband said, it's called the Children's House, is that age level. And it's also called the Casa dei Bambini, which is what Dr. Montessori in Italy, where she started her work, called it. And if you really look at Dr. Montessori's work, and she started with the poorest children in Italy, and the slums of Italy is where she started her work, and learned most of what is now embedded in the Montessori pedagogy through observation. It's a cornerstone. It's observation. So with those kind of things in mind, she actually had huge classrooms, and she would say the more the merrier. Because in these multi-age groupings, the older children take on a role with younger children that is so important to both of their development. So as the older children learn how to do certain work through the lessons and the presentations that the guides offer, because you can't do a certain piece of work or material until it's been presented to you. Those presentations can happen from the guide, but as older children master certain things, they could actually model and provide presentation to younger children. So in that very traditional sense of the Montessori pedagogy, Dr. Montessori would be okay with a large group of children. It's what's happening with the children that is the issue. Yes, there's a problem when you have 30 children and you're trying to have them on mats and make them sit still at 3 and 4 years old. There is going to be a problem. In fact, I have a grandchild who started in a classroom like that at kindergarten, and many of them, these classrooms look that way. Everybody has a little mat. You sit on your mat. The teacher's at the front of the classroom, and you listen to what the teacher says, and then she gives you a handout, and you go and you sit at your little desk, and you do whatever the little piece of paper tells you to do. Montessori is nothing like that. Children have freedom in the classroom. It's called the Children's House because it's theirs. And it's theirs with intentionality. So children have freedoms. They have the freedom to move. You don't have to sit at a desk all day or sit on a mat. They have the freedom to choose. You get to choose what you want to do based on your interest and based on developmentally where you are. And so, it's just a very different environment. So, I know I provide a lot of context maybe before I actually answer your question. But the whole piece around numbers. At Morning Glory, we're going to start small. we're starting with a cohort of 10 founding families. So 10 children between, we're really shooting for 3 and 4 year olds primarily. But if there's a family that has, 2 children, maybe 1 5 and 1 3, we'll try and accommodate. But mostly 3 and 4 year olds, and we're starting with 10. And the plan to ramp up is later in the year, maybe in the spring, then we'll add another 10. Ultimately, we are licensed. Our space and the square footage of our space is for 30 children. So it will be a classroom of kind of robust activity with a number of children. But what they can do all by themselves when they're guided with the materials and prepared adults, it's absolutely amazing. And back in Dr. Montessori's day, people came from around the world to see what these children were doing, with teachers basically just observing and learning from the children, learning and leading amongst themselves. So there's the goal, one of the primary goals is to foster independence. And you would be amazed what 3 and 4 year olds can do. But so many of us have been in other environments that it would really be like a miracle to see something different than what we've experienced. And that's how it felt for me. And that's why we're here today. Because I couldn't shake it. I thought, this is what our children need. All children need it.
Now, you guys were faith leaders at first before you took this large leap.
Still are.
Right. But initially you guys were faith leaders, and then your background is actually in law.
Yes, ma'am.
What was the thing, and I think you shared a little bit about it, but what was the thing that said, we need to do this? Because you said that you guys are parents and now grandparents, but you're deciding to go back and pull the community children with you at this juncture. What led to that for both of you that said, the time is now?
Well, I can speak to the faith piece, which is significant, right?
Yes.
From that center, from our spiritual, our faith, our walk with God, our mission for the community, not only centers on the spiritual aspect, but also the social aspect. And so when we started Impact Living Ministry almost 20 years ago, we landed on a kind of a mission of problem solving, institution building. And so we've led from that center. And so we have always had the community in mind. And what is our theology? What is our witness, our faith? Not only how does it inform us, but what does that look like in the community? And our mission statement, God's word impacts us and we impact the world. And so it's this inward transformation, but then socially we live it out and we identify where there are social ills and problems, financial literacy, affordable housing, health care, all these social ills that the folks that we serve on Sunday morning are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Systemic racism. Some argue that there is no such thing as systemic racism. Well, as James Baldwin often would say, I don't know if the United States is racist. I don't know if my boss is racist. All I know is how I'm treated in this country. It's difficult for me to have access to the ballot. It's difficult for me to afford affordable housing and so on and so forth. These are the social ills that the folks that we serve on Sunday morning, folks whose backs are hard pressed against the wall, right? We have to have a theology that speaks not only to their spiritual formation, right, but a theology that speaks to their everyday lived experience. And so we lead from that center, right? And so my wife can share a little bit about our journey towards Montessori and education. She has a whole testimony about her journey. Just like she joined me in the ministry. I've been preaching since I was 15 years of age. And so she's joined me and helped build Impact Living Ministry. And now I've joined her to walk alongside her as we build this institution around education. I'll add one more point. Our vision at Impact Living Ministry is to do three things: educate, encourage, and empower. Right? Before we started this journey, my academic journey, I didn't have a degree. And so when I transitioned off of my job, commercial printer for over 30 years, I enrolled in a college, in a university, and finished my undergrad. And I went on and got my master's divinity degree. Then I went on and got my doctorate degree to lead by example, not only my congregation, but the children that we will serve. And so this is our justice imagination. This is our moral prophetic work. This is what makes us come alive, impacting our children, and providing a space for them to learn in a culturally rooted environment where folks look like them and understand what they are grappling with as they move through their young lives.
Blue collar to scholar. That's what we call. That's what we call her.
That.
Those were our graduation T-shirts.
I love that. And true partnership, like you said, she joined you and you joined her as you guys go ahead and move forward.
Yeah.
Pastor Jess, I want to hear from you. What was the catalyst for you that felt like now is the time?
Yeah, it's a rich story, all of it, and so I might not be able to share all of what really brought us to this moment, given our time. But you know, I grew up in North Minneapolis, and my parents were both entrepreneurs. So the problem-solving, institution building was my upbringing. It was in my home. It was the roller coaster of being a child of entrepreneurs who wanted to make a difference in the community. My mother was an early childhood educator. Ruby Hughes is her name, and she was the founder of La Crèche Early Childhood Centers that sits on Olson Highway. There's actually a street named after her.
That's right, a community legend, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, she was an early childhood trailblazer and one of the few Black-led institutions that still exist in the community. And so that was my mother. My father, also an entrepreneur, built Northgate Roller Arena. So for anyone in our era that grew up roller skating, right off of Plymouth Avenue is where Northgate was. And so growing up under them and under that kind of experience, it planted a seed in me that it took many, many years later to actually grow to fruition. And so I'll just kind of fast forward through the story. You mentioned I was a lawyer. I was about 6 months from law school. I was accepted to the University of Minnesota Law School, was planning to go in the fall, and I was working for my mom actually at La Crèche in a startup director capacity. It's when Way to Grow was just getting started, and she was involved in that endeavor, and I was in this interim startup director position to hire home visitors and what have you. Well, in that same era, Mom had converted one of the preschool classrooms at La Crèche to Montessori. Now, I was young, and I was so fixed on going to law school and taking over the world on the other side of that, that I didn't pay enough attention and didn't really know what Mom was doing. I just saw this different kind of classroom, these different materials. There were two teachers. One was East Indian and a Black woman who talked about what they did in very different terms than I had grown up with. And long story short, I went off to law school, practiced law, employment discrimination attorney for many years, mediator, did all these different things. And then at the point when, as part of our justice imagination for the church, we knew we wanted to have a school, we started brainstorming. And we brought a group of people together to brainstorm. And one of those people in that circle had lived in South Africa, was originally from Zimbabwe, and he said, you know, there's a school in Johannesburg, it's called the African School of Excellence.
Wow.
And we should check out what they're doing. He knew the person that was there working with that school, and said they're getting some great outcomes with some of the poorest children in Johannesburg. So we should check out what they're doing. They were working with older children, but we said, well, check it out. Well, when we checked it out, one of the other people in that circle was a Montessorian. And she was working in Florida at a school working with autistic children. She said, you know, that African School of Excellence, what they're doing there is very Montessori. You might want to check out Montessori. As we were grappling with what kind of school do we want to start. We knew we wanted to start a school. This was about 8 years ago when we started that brainstorming. But we didn't know what kind of school. So we said, well, let's check out Montessori. Again, long story, a little bit shorter, was connected to the Montessori Center of Minnesota in St. Paul. It's a training center. There's a school there. There's a Montessori museum there about Dr. Montessori. And the minute I walked into that place, and it's absolutely beautiful, I said, I want this for my community. I want this for our children. And then I sat down with the founder of the Montessori Center, Molly O'Shaughnessy. And when I sat down with her and we started talking and I shared a little bit of the vision, she said, I knew your mom. I was in that classroom. I had some of my trainees in that classroom when she converted it to Montessori, and I knew it was a divine moment. I knew that God was calling me on a sacred mission and that Montessori was at the center of it. And the other thing Molly said to me was, oh, you want to be the head of school? You need to get trained. And I was like, no. I got all this other schooling. I'm done. You know, I'm kind of done.
I've been at this for a while.
I'm good. He's the one who wants to go back to school and do that for 10 years. And she said, no, you need to get trained. And that was in 2018. It was in August, so not around the same time, but just a couple of weeks from when the training started. And 2 weeks later, I was in it. It was powerful, impactful, healing, holistic, answered so many questions, again, as a parent and as a community member, and gave a very clear roadmap to an educational option. Might not be for everyone. I believe it's good for all children, but it's an important educational option that we do not have access to. And in this country, it's an option that unfortunately got co-opted from the way it started with Dr. Montessori with the poorest children in Italy, and now has been reserved for some of the richest children in this country. And for decades. But there's a movement afoot. There's a movement for social justice, a Montessori movement for social justice that has been happening for quite some time now, but has really gotten some steam locally and nationally, even globally. So more, I'm a part of a collaborative, Morning Glory is, of schools that are culturally rooted. So there's an indigenous Montessori school in St. Paul. There's a Somali culturally rooted school in Apple Valley. There's Latino culturally rooted schools, more than one in the city. One in particular near us, Siembra Montessori, will be the first African American rooted school in the city. And as I said earlier, to have the unique confluence of curriculum that we have, will be the first in the country.
I think that's amazing. Now, you all, I'm personally excited because you all are purposefully interrupting the school to prison pipeline.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you talk about what that means to you both?
My dissertation, my research centered on certainly the Howard Thurman and the spiritual disciplines. And my thesis, the title of my thesis, Howard Thurman, Spiritual Disciplines for African American Montessori Educators, mitigating against anti-Blackness and the criminalization of Black boys in early childhood education.
Powerful. And
so the research, and there's a ton of research on what our children are experiencing here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, in the community here, where our children, unfortunately, are learning in culturally unresponsive environments. They are being expelled. They are being labeled. Their beautiful sacred bodies, their spirits created in the Imago Dei, is being morphed into something antithetical to the creation story. And they're forced to fit, unfortunately, into white social norms or constructs. And when they don't, they're labeled as misbehaving, uneducatable, and they're removed from the learning environment, which I argue, and the research supports my thesis, is that it begins to disrupt the child's personality, and the child begins to take on this this imagery of a negative imagery of self.
Yeah.
We're mitigating against anti-blackness. We're mitigating against this psychological murdering that's happening in the classroom that our children, black boys and black girls, we're focusing on black boys. Frederick Douglass argued that it's easy to develop and empower and educate children than to repair broken men. That's work that needs to be done. But our social justice imagination and justice work is centered on reimagining an environment where our children can flourish, and wonderment and discovery and the sacredness of their beautiful black bodies can flourish. And so we're mitigating against what our children are going through every day in the classroom. And the result is the cradle to prison pipeline. Our children are becoming disinterested in learning. And so their attention's drawn to something other than intellectualism, right, and discovery and wonderment. And so we're mitigating against it. This is our prophetic work. This is our social justice work, and it's critical. It's critical. The intersectionality between race and education and the disparities that we as African Americans are still confronted with in the 21st century in the richest country. It's a problem. Now our work is not small. It's a big work that we're called to do, and we're not doing it in a silo. We're doing it in community. My wife mentioned the Montessori Center and MIPSAC and our community partners. And so we're not in a silo. We believe in community, and we're part of the community. And we believe this is a movement. This is the part of this movement that's happening throughout the country, our social justice movement, the advocacy for our children.
Black boys make up roughly 10% in preschool enrollment, but they make up 34% of those who experience one or more suspensions at preschool. That's where the pipeline starts. That's where it starts. And that's why we're starting there. And, the vision, we know that Black girls are facing similar and unique and distinct challenges in those same spaces as little Black girls. And we love them, and we're working to get to them as well. The overall vision is to expand down to toddlers so that we get even earlier ahead of the curve, and that we are able to bring the beauty of the Montessori pedagogy to our littlest children, because it happens even before we're born, but certainly from that 0 to 6 is so critical to children's development. And so we want to go down to toddlers and then expand up to 3rd grade. And at that point, we believe our children will be, like that tree planted by the rivers of water. They will be firmly rooted in who they are, that we can work with other educational environments to support children and going in whatever direction is appropriate for them and their families at that point, whether it's to continue Montessori, going to another parochial school, or maybe a public school, or what have you, whatever the best path from there is. But they will be solidly rooted in who they are, whose they are, who created them, affirmed in the gifts and the beauty that they bring to the world and to our community, and their ability to lead. And we don't have to wait until a child is 16, 17 years old. Okay, now I'm going to give you some leadership responsibility. No, we give 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds leadership responsibility. By the time they get there, there will be problem solving, institution building.
That's right. That's right.
So, that's what we're believing for.
Now, congratulations is in order to you both on behalf of Morning Glory Montessori, because you all are the recent award recipients of the Path to Black Health Grant.
Yeah. Praise God.
Yes. Out of, what did they say, 90 applicants, 14 groups were chosen, and you all are part of that number.
Yeah.
What does that mean to have the support of the Minnesota Department of Health, specifically the Office of African American Health, partnering with you guys in this way?
It means everything.
It means everything.
As a startup, anyone that has started anything, that can be such a fragile and vulnerable and difficult journey on every level, but certainly financially. So to have some financial support in what we're doing is really helpful. But beyond that we are a part of this inaugural office as it's getting started, and we're a part of this inaugural team of and cohort, is to really think deeply and then to act intentionally around the social determinants of health.
Yes.
And what it means for African American people to be well, what it means for us to be healthy, to be whole. And I'm just excited because it's a wonderful cohort, really doing diverse work throughout the state. Frankly, there's some in Duluth even that are a part of the cohort. And but we, as I understand it, are the only one that's firmly situated in the early childhood space. And so we get to work with the Department of Health to define health for Black people in this state, and specifically for our youngest citizens. And that is an honor to be a part of that journey. I mean, I'm just overwhelmed as I think about it that we were selected to be a part of it. So very grateful to Director Rucker and the entire team that is forging this work within the Department of Health.
May I just add, there are just policies and unjust policies. Policies that can uplift the personhood of the individual and the community. And just want to acknowledge the policymakers who decided and came into agreement that Black health is important, and the Black community is important to this community. That is heartfelt. It is a blessing, giving our political context and what's happening in our country, the polarization, the division. There are some folks in this state, in the state of Minnesota, that still believe in the idea of democracy. And it's not just for a few folks, but it's for everyone. And the Constitution is for everyone, and liberty and justice and freedom for all is for everyone, and access to affordable housing and health care and access to higher education and programming is important, not just for a few folks or the elite group or the dominant group. Maybe I shouldn't use that language, but we've got folks in our community that are struggling. We've got folks in our community that are barely making it, parents, single family homes, right? Inflation. We know all the social ills. our role as leaders is to walk with these families, walk with these children, and also to remind policymakers that these folks are humans. These folks are living everyday lives. And so shout out to the Department of Health, shout out to the policymakers, shout out to the decision makers. We are elated. I'm elated because my wife works from sun up to sundown. I work hard, but she will outwork anyone. And so she's been working tirelessly for her vision, and I'm so proud of her, and I'm proud to stand next to her and work with her in community as we reimagine a space for our beautiful Black boys to learn and grow and discover who they are and who God created them to be.
Well said. Now, for those that are interested in keeping up with the work of Morning Glory Montessori, please provide the formal address. Reverend Dr. Timothy, Pastor Jess, I would like you to give, if you all have any social media handles or anything like that, so that people can stay connected to the work and join you as you guys go to impact the world.
Well, the best way to stay in touch is to go to our website, morningglory.org. And that's 2 G's in the middle. Sometimes folks get thrown off by that. So morningglory.org. Lots of information there about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we'll continue to add to the website. It's also the place where if there are families that are interested in becoming a founding family, and that's what we're calling anyone that enrolls over the next 3 years. So Montessori happens in 3-year cycles.
Okay.
So 6, as I said, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, are the 3-year cycles. So founding families who have children that are 3 and 4 could enroll potentially for the fall. We still have a couple slots left. And families that have younger ones could also contact us. There's a way to schedule a call, get more information, meet with me. Our social media is ramping up. We are on LinkedIn, and we do have a Facebook page.
Yes.
I'm not the social media person, so we're working to bolster that part of what we do. But our website is a robust place to connect with us, and we have a newsletter. You can sign up to get that, and just stay in touch.
Wonderful. And Reverend Dr. Timothy, please provide us the formal address.
Morning Glory Montessori is located on 3620 East 26th Street in the basement of our church, Impact Living Ministry. It's under construction now. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful space, and they should be finishing up with the construction part of their work in a few weeks now. So we're excited.
Thank you both for joining me today on this episode of Community Connections. I was really impacted by your speech at the celebration for the Office of African American Health, and I wanted to have you guys on. So I am humbled that you both said yes and that you have shared with viewers the work of Morning Glory Montessori.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for following up and inviting us.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for this episode of Community Connections. I hope that something that was said today you have found inspirational and or educational. Please make sure that you check out the website of Morning Glory Montessori, and that you may find yourself or a scholar in your network to connect with these amazing people. As always, I am Anna Orr. This has been on OROMIA11, and I look forward to connecting again with you soon.